So I'm just gonna go through a quick. Kitchen's closed. Sorry. Sorry. I guess it's too late. Theo, kitchen's closed. Come on in. You get the parents late. You gotta. So, just want to go over a quick political situation that we've got basically a special class on Einstein the Mensch inside of the box. And then after that, we've got probably a myriad of presentations that we have many people understand. So, we did not start the celebration for the Sarah. So now we're going to long. But we've got more to celebrate than just the wedding. So the flowers are there for that, but maybe there's more some other reasons. Because most people in this room know we're actually at a fairly decisive point in a political fight that we uniquely have been waging in this country against practically the crimes of every other political organization in the United States. I don't think there was one organization that actually sided with us these last 7.5 years to take down Obama. There are many that opposed themselves as such, but when it came down to it, they ultimately all compromised and folded entirely on the question of Obama and tried to get some popular support on the anti-Obama questions, but they actually were basically part of the same fabric and bought and paid for by the same institutions that control Obama. So it's been a rough road. The level of resistance against our organization is most people would have considered insurmountable. So there's a certain sweetness to the moment that we're now experiencing. The same kind of creative thing you encounter. You have to be a little careful with that because we're not done yet. But it is there in the sense that this guy was by far the most psychopathic person to ever come into the White House. When you say he's a narcissist, they said it's hard to find a person like this. There are very few people on the planet that have the kind of psychological pathology of Obama. And that's characteristically true. Very few people. There are a lot of crazy people out there. Most of them, though, are well aware that they should not be taking responsibility for the greater portion of mankind's condition. Like you go talk to some people who are have some problems, or have some anger problems, or race towards society, or don't like people, and we have a propensity even to kill. And we talk to some murderers. They don't necessarily aren't going to ever think that they're going to put on a facade of, well, I'm here to help. I'm here to help. I'm here to take care of you and make you better. And I uniquely can do it better than anyone else. That's strange. And you will find that within some Wall Street bankers, that disposition, you're more likely to find them there than anywhere else. But so it's been a tough road. So let me get into a little bit of the political situation. I'm really just talking about the kitchen's just generally closed this graph. This is only about half an hour. I'm going to be short. It'll be a break, and I'm not going to make it hard on people, but it's just we're really in part of a unique process right now, and I want everyone to be able to concentrate. So the I don't want to do this. Well, the best way to put this at the point right now, I think what's worth at least considering for the people here, because everyone knows a lot of the specifics and details and some of the things that have been developing, but let's just put it in context. That it's culminated in a way on multiple levels. So it's not just a question of Obama. Obviously, got this guy lined up on JASTA. You've got neocons coming out to support him. You've got the UK. You've got the EU. You've got the FBI. You've got even Republicans. The only ones who have so far defended him right now, Matt Thornberry, the big Republican Texan from the head of the House Armed Services, is out supporting them. It's largely Republicans, just like it was with Obama's free trade policy, and like it's been most of Obama's policies has been Republicans. But almost every single international institution, which has been basically compromising or out to destroy mankind, has sided with Obama on this policy. any institution of any decency around the world is obviously siding with us, the 9/11 families and everything else. But it's obviously the people know it. It's just worthwhile just to situate it. That clearly what happened with the G20 and China's assertion was something we may have taken note of, but probably we could have taken greater note of it, at least in terms of how you measure those distinctions. Because I don't know how G20 summits often go. I believe the likely story that usually the person opens and then the U.S. president comes in, they run the show, and then everybody leaves, and the status quo is maintained, and nothing's actually discussed in any way whatsoever. At this time, we got a completely different process. China just asserted we're now a dominant force on the planet, and we're not backing down. You're not going to control this. We're going to run the whole thing. We're going to control the entire discussion. And they didn't just do it at the summit, they did it for weeks or months prior. We had a series of discussions that China was making it very clear. They asked for an investigation by the head of the Bank of International Settlements and the so-called Financial Stability Board, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, Federal Reserve. They said, why don't you guys give us a sense of what you think the weaknesses are of the financial system? So of course they come up with a report. These guys are accountants, so they do actually give you the numbers. They tell you, oh, we've got some major problems. We've got trillions upon trillions of dollars in derivatives that are stuck in these things called like exchange centers. They pocket these new entities left and right. So, so China took real responsibility. It was a direct affront to the entire process. In addition to the fact that we know they set up the AIIB, they set up the new development bank, and they set up the new Silk Road Fund. They set up major credit institutions. They set up a full-scale policy. So it was obviously a fairly large confrontation. And that's there. That really sets the foundation for something. Now, the biggest problem, this is what Helga has emphasized, there's just not a recognition from the West of this reality. You've got a good article in Forbes, goes through a guy going through the 7 cities on the Silk Road. It's somewhat impressive and amazing. But there's just absolutely not. There should be the discussion everywhere. This should be the policy discussion. What is this thing? How does it work? How do we play into it? What do we do? Some of these nations have signed up for the AIIB, but they act like they just want to sign up because they don't want to miss out on a big bang. They don't recognize the general forward shifting orientation. Now, some people, I think to many of us, that seems inevitable. I don't think any of us expected this big light to go on. But we do recognize that light has to go on. Now, part of it is, the reason the light hasn't gone on is because this entire process, you look at the justified, the EU, the UK, Obama, the Wall Street Journal, the neocons, all lined up on this. Well, no wonder there hasn't been a big shift. Because all of the main institutions which are dominating policy in the West are fundamentally for a world war, pro-terrorist, pro-drug trade, pro-Wall Street orientation. And the key linchpin on that whole thing is Obama. The terror program has been run to maintain that enforcement. Because are the people of Germany in favor of what the EU policy right now, or the migrant policy? Are the people of Great Britain? Are the people of the United States for this clown show? So what we've seen is that process. That's what's covering up the discussion process. Now, so this gets into another decisive factor. So I just want to line up some of these things. The Syria situation has culminated, and I think people probably have a sense of this, but maybe not. So I'm going to go through some of the details. Aleppo was always going to be the battle. It's been the key occupation of the terrorists in Syria for 4 years. This was a city targeted because it was the main commercial and industrial center. If you didn't take that out, then Syria and the National Army maintains an industrial capacity that really defeats you. So they targeted it. This was British intelligence. They knew what they had to do to target the process. So Aleppo was the key fight. I could be wrong on dates, about 6 weeks ago, there was a fight to get a full encirclement of the terrorists in Aleppo. Partly this was a factor because Aleppo was close to the border with Turkey. So Turkey's changes towards Russia obviously led to a significant change in the ability to supply terrorists operating in the north, Latakia in the west, and Aleppo in the east of Syria. We got a full encirclement about 4 to 6 weeks ago. At that point, a ton of pressure came down on Russia and on Assad to say we've got to broker a ceasefire as a humanitarian crisis. And so eventually they brokered a ceasefire agreement. This was about 2 weeks ago. They brokered a ceasefire agreement. So you've got to let humanitarian aid happen. And they brokered one a little while ago, but it didn't last long. You've got to let a ceasefire take place. What's Obama's response? Because the ceasefire holds for a week, then the U.S. and Russia implement a joint implementation center. They begin to coordinate their attacks on terrorist operations. And any so-called moderates will have been given plenty of notice to separate from al-Nusra and other identified terrorist groups. So any positions of al-Nusra are now all al-Nusra. You can't just say, well, there's some moderates still there. It's like, well, they had a week. So literally, on, was it Saturday? Last Saturday, just 2 days before that program is going to now be 7 days of ceasefire, a joint implementation program, where the United States never flies, never drops bombs. All of a sudden, the United States, along with Denmark, Australia, and the UK, all happened to fly a major bombing raid in a small town called Deir ez-Zor and killed over 60 members of the Syrian army and wounded another 120. Within 2 days, a major UN aid convoy. So, of course, that pissed off the Syrian government and Russia. It was a major flagrant violation of international law and just mass murder. We have no international rights to even be operating in Syria. As Chuck pointed out earlier, you can do that once, you can't keep doing that. So, they did this. So why would it happen now? Why right before this thing was going to be settled? Of course, a major discussion of the United Nations Security Council, right before the United Nations General Assembly was going to begin. Within 2 days, a major aid convoy, part of really the ceasefire purpose, to bring so-called aid and supplies to the civilians, to the so-called civilians. And it leaves Russia, it leaves basically Syrian and Russian controlled area. There's a road on the north of Aleppo called Costello Road. In the north. It's one road. And the Syrian army finally took that to fill the encirclement. Once it leaves Syrian and Russian controlled areas, it reaches an area which is controlled by the rebels, the terrorists. It's totally destroyed. 20 people are killed. Immediately, the United States attacks Russia as the source. Russia bombed it, Syria bombed it, or Russia bombed it. Pure logic. But the point was, the coincidence of these events was clear. Obama and the British had said, we are about to lose this entire gambit. They're going to crush us very soon. And if the United States joins with Russia and Syria to do that, it will create a capability for peace. We'll lose our ability to oppose anything. The moderates will have to have left. A full siege on the terrorists in East Aleppo will now be viable, and it'll be comprehensive with both the U.S. coalition and Russia and Syria. And so Obama and the British decided to kill and murder 60 members of the Syrian army who were basically under siege by ISIS, and then destroy an entire aid convoy to blow up the entire process right before the UN General Assembly. So, we're going to keep that and just mute it, right? What's Assad's response? Full assault on East Aleppo. What's Russia's response? We're not going to pause for a second. We're going to keep bombing. And so we're not going to give a moment for you to. We're not going to give you this 3 or 4 days to see if the moderates separate any longer. Separate. East Aleppo was under full siege, and Assad had made it clear, he had an interview with the Associated Press and made it clear he intends to win this war in the next months ahead, by the end of the year. I would gamble, given the level of morale that will take place within the terrorist groupings, because you have Turkey iced out, and now they're collaborating with Russia. You've got Iran, Iraq, and Egypt all working with Russia. And you've got no ability to really provide any assistance. You're under siege. That this will likely be consolidated to a large degree before the election, and will be a major blow to Obama and the entire policy, because this is the regime change policy going back to the intervention of Iraq in 2003. It is Libya. accounts in a fundamentally different world. Fundamentally different. So that's substantial. So all of these things now, you can see how it's converging. Chinese economic policy is embracing more and more of the world on the boundary. You've now got a strategic shift in this British imperial policy, and the change is all coalescing. Now, the other factor, which is obviously significant, is the banking crisis. And everyone knows about the Wells Fargo public trials. I mean, it's systemic fraud on a broad scale. I kind of blame this on some low-level employees. This is coming really from high-level management at one of the banks that was so-called, it was the highest market value bank in the country. This is like kind of like big Apple. It doesn't employ that many people, but it's got a lot of stock value. So it's just this whole financial system could be triggered at any minute. So the FDIC, which insures all of the bank accounts, came out, the head of it came out and said, the leverage of Lehman Brothers is now 37 to 1, greater than Deutsche Bank, which is greater than Lehman Brothers. It means they're 37 times bankrupt. That's what that means. They've got, right. So, they're the worst case. All of them are this case. If you're 20 to 1, you're a conservative. If you're only bankrupt 20 times, you're a conservative bank. So this thing is ready to snap. And the question of Glass-Steagall is right there on the tip of the tongue of not just institutional types, but a broad base of Americans. Largely because the work was done. And the steps being taken, Japan is trying to do quantitative easing with qualitative easing with other easing. That's what they announced. QQE plus something like that. Really, they're trying to minimize the differentiation between short-term and long-term bonds as part of it. Anyway, I'm not. It's a bit of it's all a bit of a joke. It's kind of it's like epicycles. It really is. Just call them in. And everyone has to admit that it doesn't. Every step they take now just causes more anxiety and concern because it just exposes the fact that you have nothing else. You're just totally bankrupt. You've got nothing else to throw into the process to address the crisis that we all know exists. So all of this is now occurring. It has been occurring. And all of a sudden, a bill that, at one point they were saying we've got to get JASTA passed and everything get to 28 pages. That was the argument for a while, 2 months ago. Then, just 2 months ago, we got to 28 pages. They dangled the threat they thought was to basically call out the president for being a fascist and run the pages out of the classified room and just bring them to the congressional floor and just force the issue. As soon as they call the bluff of the White House immediately does it. Now the White House says, look, we're doing everything we can. We're even giving you a 28 page. But it wasn't foreseeable that this JASTA fight would have coalesced now in such a way. But it's not really surprising. You see all the characteristics to it. It touches the very core of American identity. I mean, firefighters, first responders, the so-called, just the heroes. The people that's actually, this idea of wired wrong idea. And it was out from the mass a couple of Sundays ago. And these people who seem to actually run into danger zones for the benefit of other people. That fact is kind of an Americana. People might have remembered in France there was a terrorist incident on a train. There was a couple of ex-Marines, and they wrestled the guy down. And it was like, these are typical Americans, But that's the old, gestalt of an American. It's like this kind of the heroes of the day kind of thing. Now it's a bit romantic and it's a bit absurd in some levels, but it does capture that quality. And yet these firefighters are that on a daily basis. They're not. It's not romantic. It's real. It's their real lives. And so it touches that. It touches what we know to be the greatest atrocity in the United States. And I referenced this a number of times over the last week, but you really see it. Cass Sunstein, who's basically the top behaviorist brought into the Obama administration. And so this was the grouping that Obama brought in to launch his presidency, the behaviorists. There was the Stanford group. These were traditional academic economists calling for infrastructure development, credit, financing, and so on. And a number of these people actually were in ongoing discussion with Lynn on a consistent basis. This was the Stanford group. They were ready to come in. They were like the incubated group ready to run the next presidency, especially if it was Clinton. All of a sudden, you get these behaviorists. Or they might have been 14 years telling, and the cat's seems to be leading one. He's the most dominant factor. His wife is Samantha Powers, the witch at the UN, the wicked witch in the West. So, and what does he say? He says the one thing you've got to target are 9/11 groups. Got to target those groups who are running conspiracies on 9/11, which, of course, at the time seemed like a bunch of Alex Jones kids worried about Building 7. But now all these groups aren't talking about Building 7. They're talking about the 28 pages in Jasper and the Saudis and Prince Bandar. This whole question. Because ultimately what Sussex and the British knew was this was a core question like Kennedy's assassination was. This has a core emotional and psychological question. That if you open this up, you unravel our entire control of the psychological condition of the population and our ability to issue policy based on that. Because all of Bush and all of Obama's foreign policy has been ultimately premised on the psychological derangement of the American people from the flight forward psychotic response after 9/11. The police state perpetual war program that was put in at 9/11 jacked the American people up. Everybody remembers the flags on like 4 flags on a car, like 7. It was like, what is this? This isn't patriotism. The invasion of Iraq certainly wasn't. The bombing of Afghanistan hasn't solved anything. So you open that up to force a thoughtfulness. Lyndon LaRouche called for that a week after the event in an interview with John Segerson and said, there's got to be a thoughtful response. You can't have panic. You can't go try to solve it. We have to actually take down the real evil behind us. And it was Vladimir Putin who would offer his friendship in that regard. The alliance that we're fighting for today was on the table at that point. And it was rejected. So we're opening that question up with this Jasper bill. And of course, what's interesting about it all is that, it does open up a trial, a civil trial on the Saudis, and the financing of 9/11 will break open to Alameda. The British are highly concerned that foreign funding of terrorist groups is now going to become something that has become publicly exposed by civil trial. And that's going to happen. And you're going to expose the FBI role in this. Because the FBI is all over for blocking every investigation that could be followed for pursuing the Saudis and their involvement in these attacks. So the whole mess can be publicly exposed. Now, of course, that may take some time, but they realize they don't have a lot of time. They've got to completely control this process. They've got to be able to implement a police state-like operation under the next financial crisis. They've now got a legitimate, viable physical option in the world. They're not the only player. Everybody doesn't have to turn to the BIS and the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England. They can go to the AIIB, the New Development Bank. Africa's going to say F you. South America says F you. All of Asia already has. Some cases in the Philippines, literally. So, FUE, right? It's four letters. Never meant so much. So that's why what Lynn said today in discussion with Dave and others with the Manhattan Project, and Dave did a discussion with that people should definitely watch. Because we're continuing a major mobilization, concentrated focus. These next, today, tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, by all means, as the families, Carrie Strada, one of the family members of the victims of 9/11 said, we're not going to get to sleep this weekend. We're very confident we can win this. We're confident we've got the override, but we're not going to sleep because you don't get a moment like this twice. If they lose us, it's lost. Maybe the next president passes it, maybe not. You don't know who the next president's going to be. You can't believe anyone. You can't believe either one of them, so it doesn't matter. So you take this opportunity is coming now, and what Russia and China are watching, as other nations are, is to see is Obama going to be backed up and pinned to a wall by his own Congress? Are the LaRouche organization going to have effectively mobilized political resistance to Obama's fascist program? Have they not been asking that for years? Have we not been getting reports? Is there resistance in the United States? Is there resistance to this policy? Is Congress ever going to do anything? And the elder would constantly go, everybody wants to know, is there any resistance? Well, for the first time, we've seen real resistance. And it can actually manifest itself not just with a defeat on Obama, not just with an exposure of all of our enemies lined up on this question, but it increases the morale to do the full job, to go for full impeachment. And as Lynn said, and this is what our mobilization has to entail these next few days, this was treason. He's legitimately protecting, or illegitimately, effectively protecting enemies of our own country. That's essentially what his own defense says. There should be a decision by Congress to decide if Saudi Arabia is a state sponsor of terrorism or not. The very fact is they are a state sponsor of terrorism. This lawsuit is going to prove it, and you're going to be exposed as covering for those people who are not just state sponsors of terrorism, but state sponsors of terrorism against the United States. And that's what we're looking at, this kind of potential shift. And it's the world situation, and you can see that this becomes a major catalyst. So we should be very excited, because if we could win this, there's a lot more we're going to have to do. Obama's impeachment, the Glass-Steagall question, financial crisis. But look, most people in this country are not accustomed to going up. They're not accustomed to fighting battle after battle with the expectation that we're going to keep winning and we're going to keep fighting. That's what real life is like. I mean, you're just always fighting to take the next battle, the next kill. That's a creative impulse. That's a creative instinct. What's the next mountain to climb? What's the next planet to conquer or to explore? That's the fight we have to take on. That's what life looks like. And so I think we're on the verge of that, and it's not going to stop. It just has to grow. We've got to grow. We've got to have more outlets. This room should be this full every Saturday. Our deployment should be this effective every Saturday and every day. But that's what I want to give as an overview. We are on full-scale mobilization. We are putting people to work. We're having a call at noon tomorrow. People don't know. I'm sure some people from here will be on. We have the 10 o'clock call with Lynn Howard. We will have then. I don't have to have a follow-up call. Everyone will already be here, but there's an outreach call with all activists, so we should make sure that any activists we have in the entire area, this is not just a Monday call, this is like a Thursday night call and a Monday call combined, full scale, any contact, any activists around the country should be on for marching orders. We're going to try to pull together a set of the congressmen. Max Thornberry obviously is on that. We'll discuss that more tomorrow, I imagine, to make sure that by Monday morning we have a full list of who needs to be targeted, plus just the blatant calling into everyone's own member of Congress and Senate. Because we're out to win this. And we're not, as Lynn said, we're not going to have any crossfire. We're not going to try to confuse it or add other layers. But it's worthwhile to recognize the broader picture that plays a factor in. But there's a singular focus to make sure we consolidate this. So, and if we do, we're going to have a lot more to celebrate in the coming period. And that's exciting to think about. It's been a long, it hasn't been a lot to celebrate these last 7.5 years. It's been rough. I'm like, no, I've been fine. I've been fine and totally optimistic the whole time. That's probably true. It's probably true. This has been tough. And you have to realize, you have to kind of look outside yourself and realize, like, yeah, this has been really hard. It's hard on our own movement. How many people, I mean, we know the financial stories of our own process. This has been really tough. They wanted to destroy us. They never thought we would survive. They never thought we would exist. They never thought this room would be filled right now, that we would have this operation on the West Coast or in New York or in Texas. They never expected that we would be at this moment. You know, a month before Obama, a new president's going to be elected, we're going to bring this bastard down. They just never thought it could be possible. But it's a persistence and a commitment to truth and something far greater than just the practical characteristics of life that made it possible. So we should be very happy, but we should not relent for a second, for the very reasons that we all know are true. So that's what I've got. If there are any other statements, declarations, or questions, we'll take those, and we'll get to Jason Ross. Okay. That's totally welcome. Questions have become somewhat obsolete, so declarations are even better. Okay, I think it's pretty clear. I think everyone's pretty excited. So, you want to have people take a quick, or do you want to just jump in? Jump in. All right, there you go.
Declaration. So I'd like to, I'm Jason Ross, for those of you who haven't met before, and most people here. I want to talk about Einstein the Mensch. And I want to talk about it from the context of where we are politically, and I want to leave a lot of time for discussion, because I want to know what people have been doing, what kind of questions you have about it, if you've been taking up this topic. So LaRouche over the past few months has been stressing the role of Einstein as someone to understand. And let me start by giving some ideas of why I think that is, in discussions with him and then working on Einstein. And one thing that LaRouche has pointed out repeatedly is that Einstein's misunderstood. Almost everything that people think they know about Einstein, a lot of it's just not true. And who he was as a person is dramatically misrepresented. One major way of doing that is to present him as a kind, absent-minded, bumbling, forgetful professor who figured out some amazing things about science and otherwise didn't wear socks, and his hair was a mess. And that's Einstein. Now, that's not true. He was a very political person through his life. You know, as a young man, I believe before an adult even, he had renounced his German citizenship for the first time, in opposition to the militarism, the Prussian militarism that he saw there, in opposition to the draft. He spoke frequently about universal refusal to serve in the military. He said if 2% of people drafted into armies refuse, governments will collapse if they try to imprison that many people for refusing the draft. So, you know, that was his idea after World War I. In the United States, and before he came to the United States, he was outspoken against racism, against fascism. He was a proponent of American volunteers and others who went to Spain to fight against the Franco-fascism there. He also opposed Bolshevism. He refused to attend conferences in Russia because he knew that simply by going, that would be construed as approving of the regime there, which he didn't. He had ideas about socialism and in a certain sense, but what he saw as the destruction of individual liberty in Russia was something that he absolutely did not accept at all. In the United States, he wrote essays for the newspaper of W.E.B. Du Bois about how racism is a scourge that has to be removed. He, despite in the last 20 years of his life, he wouldn't attend universities that wanted to give him an honorary doctorate anymore. He had enough. A lot of these events were sort of a bunch of fanfare. He didn't really enjoy them. There was one event he did attend where everybody made all these effusive speeches about him and then asked him to say something. He pulled out his violin and played a Mozart sonata instead. So in the last 20 years of his life, he really just said basically no. He just wouldn't take any of these invitations, except to go to the oldest black university, Lincoln University, to give a speech there on relativity and speak to the students and staff there. So he was a full person. He got in tremendous trouble with Hoover's FBI, for example, despite the fact that part of the U.S. going for the Manhattan Project to try to build the bomb under the concern that Hitler was going to do it, which was a real concern. After taking Czechoslovakia, Germany had said no uranium can be exported anymore. It was clear there's a signal, oh, they're going to go for a bomb. And so Roosevelt, Einstein had, with Leo Szilard, had written a letter to Roosevelt, got the ball rolling on that. But then he never had a security clearance. he didn't work on the bomb project at all. Not that he really wanted to. It wasn't, exactly the kind of thing he liked to do. But in terms of what a controversial person he was even kept out of that. In his visits to the U.S. as a celebrity, where it's hard to imagine a scientist, really anyone, having the kind of celebrity that Einstein had. It's hard to imagine anyone drawing the kinds of crowds that he could draw when he came to the U.S. for the first time, for example, to do some fundraising for Zionist causes and to set up what became the Hebrew University. Um, you know, he attended the premiere of City Lights with Charlie Chaplin as his main guest of honor. He spoke to crowds about relativity. He spoke to crowds about opposition to militarism and the need for peace, and in his later years, about some sort of international arrangement for durable peace in the world. So he was a full person. I'm going to go through some brief aspects of his life overall, and then we can discuss whatever's on people's minds. So, one thing about him, I've got a lot of quotes, so let's hear from Einstein directly. When he was young, the things that most people pursued didn't really interest him. Trying to get ahead in life, it didn't appeal to him. He saw that there was something very empty about the way that people pursued what they did with their lives. He said, even when I was a fairly precocious young man, the nothingness of the hopes and strivings which chase most men restlessly through life came to my consciousness with considerable vitality. He wanted something more to attach the meaning of his life to. He wanted something more to do with himself. Despite being raised in a very unreligious family, I mean, a Jewish family, but not a practicing one, he took up religion. He got interested in the Bible, and he saw that as a connection to something greater. However, he was very disillusioned when reading some science books. He realized that not everything in the Bible was literally true. And he said, for him, the consequence was a positively fanatic freethinking coupled with the impression that youth is intentionally being deceived by the state through lies. It was a crushing impression. Suspicion against every kind of authority grew out of this experience. A skeptical attitude towards the convictions which were alive in any specific social environment. An attitude which has never left me, even though later on, because of better insight into causal connections, it has lost some of its original poignancy. So what was his identity? What could he identify with? Well, the great world outside, the opportunity to learn about nature. He noticed that, he said, out there's this huge world which exists independently of our thought and which stands before us like a great, giant, eternal riddle, at least partly accessible to our thinking. The contemplation of this world beckoned like a liberation, and I soon noticed that many a person who I had learned to esteem and to admire had found inner freedom and security in devoted occupation with it. He said this was a certain kind of paradise, different than the religious paradise that many people pursued, but for him it was a different kind of paradise. Understanding and learning more about how nature is composed, for him that had a very religious sense to it. He believed that, he would say things like, I asked myself about a scientific idea, would God have done it this way? Was there something good about it? Did it make sense? Was it a beautiful idea? Another thing that was very important to him when he was young, well, at least by middle school, was music. He got a violin from his mother when he was 6. She was a pianist, and she made him have scales and things like this. He really didn't like it until when he was 13, he started to really fall in love with Mozart. And he wasn't trying to, yes, he had to make the right notes, but it was because there was a musical sense that he wanted to get across. And then he really took it up, and he really fell in love with it. It was something that was tremendously important to his life. Connect that to a major shift in the time period that LaRouche has been pointing at. The big shift in 1900 towards mathematics and culturally, after the death of Brahms, towards just crappy, bad, or deliberately ugly, nasty music. Things like The Rite of Spring, things like crap. So, and he never, here's what he said about some musicians. He said, Mozart's music is so pure and beautiful that I see it like a reflection of the inner beauty of the universe itself. And of course, like all great beauty, his music was pure simplicity. To him, it seemed that, quote, Beethoven created his music, but Mozart's music is so pure, it seems to have been ever present in the universe. What Mozart would have said. He said that Wagner had a lack of architectural structure, which he saw as decadence. He said Strauss was gifted, but without inner truth. And he thought Handel had a certain shallowness. Later in life, he did come to love Beethoven as well, which he said earlier made him feel naked, and too personal, it was uncomfortable for him. Although in his later years, he would listen repeatedly to Beethoven's Missa Solemnis, which, not being a really religious type of person in the sense of, a mass, and not liking Beethoven earlier was a big change for him. But anyway, as a young man in Germany, he saw a bunch of, soldiers marching down the street, the marching band with their Prussian marching tunes, and a lot of the other students, everyone went to see the parade and cheer them on and march along with them. And he made Einstein cry. He said, I don't want to be like one of those poor people. If anybody enjoys marching along to the sound of music like that, it's like him getting a brain was just a waste. Anyway, he ended up, his family and business didn't go well. He moved to Italy, and they're moving to Switzerland. He renounced his German citizenship. So he had no citizenship for a few years. He had to save up money and apply to become Swiss later. And while he was there, he went to college, got his degree. He spent years and years and years and years looking for a job. He spent 2 years, no luck. He was writing to professors all across Europe. Back. Even his dad started writing to professors, saying, please give my son a job. He's very skilled. Also, there's a sort of a myth or rumor, or there's an idea that, has anyone heard that Einstein was bad at math? Now, one person who started that rumor was Einstein, because he said that he wished he had spent more time on math when he was younger. But he had learned calculus when he was 15. So he didn't mean like he couldn't do, figure out how much to tip at a restaurant or something. He meant like, there was far more advanced stuff that he was thinking he had wished he'd spent a little bit more time on. So he gets a job through a family friend at the patent office. They make a new position that's really just for him. So he's very thankful for this. He says that now that annoying habit of starving is over. He finally says he can go ahead and get married to his fiancee now that he's finally got a job. And while he's working at the patent office, the kinds of patents he's getting are about, a lot of it's about electromechanics, clocks, motors, things like that. That was his family business. His father made dynamos, and they got contracts for street lighting and things like that. So he was very much, even at work with his day-to-day job, he was getting all sorts of people sending in ideas about things like clocks, like synchronizing clocks for the train system. In Switzerland, they were very much into having their clocks synchronized. Something very important to them. He worked near a train station, had a huge clock. So I don't know. That doesn't make it inevitable that he figured out relativity. A lot of people work there. But so in 1905, he wrote a letter to a friend of his. He and two friends formed a Olympia Academy, they call it. And they get together and read books together and discuss science and philosophy. So here's a letter that he wrote to one of his friends. He asked his friend, hey, send me your latest paper. I want to read it. I'm probably one of only 2 people who will read your paper, so you should send it to me. And he says, I promise you 4 papers in return, May 1905. The first deals with radiation and the energy properties of light and is very revolutionary, as you will see if you send me your work first. The second paper is a determination of the true sizes of atoms. The third proves that bodies on the order of 1,000th of a millimeter, suspended in liquids, must perform an observable random motion that is produced by thermal motion. Such movement of suspended bodies has actually been observed by physiologists who call it Brownian motion. The fourth paper is only a rough draft at this point and is an electrodynamics of moving bodies, which employs a modification of the theory of space and time. So if I was his friend, I would send him my paper. Those sound like the pretty interesting things he's working on. Just casual mention there. New theory of space and time. So what are these 4 papers? All of them were pretty shocking. The first one that he mentioned was about the photoelectric effect. So this is 1905. 5 years earlier, in 1900, Max Planck, great German scientist, had developed the theory of the quantum. And he did it to explain the kind of light that hot things emit. Things get hot, like you look in a toaster, when it gets hot, it starts glowing, or in a old-fashioned light bulb. Filament gets hot, it glows, you have the light. The only way that Planck was able to explain physically the kind of light that these things gave off was to explain that the way the light was absorbed and emitted by this hot body was that it came in pieces. That light came in chunks of quanta, but the interaction occurred in pieces. That was an idea that had really been thrown away for about over 200 years. Isaac Newton said that light came in pieces, corpuscles, bodies, particles. The wave theory of light, by being able to explain a number of effects that Newton couldn't, had become the prevailing theory of light. 100 years before Planck, Young had done a lot of experiments with light. Everyone said light's a wave. Something that's like a wave doesn't seem like it's made out of pieces. So when Planck said that light interacted with matter in pieces, it was very strange. What Einstein said in 1905 was that light exists as pieces. It's not just in its interaction with matter, that light actually comes in what we now call today photons. Max Planck didn't agree with this. Max Planck thought this went too far. The guy who invented the concept, he thought this was a bit much. So that's Einstein's first paper. His second paper, The Size of Atoms. He described how, by measuring how thick and sludgy sugar water would get when you put more sugar in the water, you could figure out how big an atom was and how many there were in, say, a cup of water. And doing experiments based on the way he said you could do that, people got values to within 1% of the value they had gotten by other means, by using gases. So, new way of measuring atoms, which are also controversial. People didn't all believe in atoms. The thing about Brownian motion, I don't want to say anything about that. Relativity. So, this is really the big famous one that people associate Einstein with. Einstein developed the theory of relativity. And yeah, that's another pretty misunderstood concept. So there's two, okay, we'll come back to that. So 2 aspects of relativity. One is that we shouldn't make distinctions in our understanding of nature where there's no difference that's physically in nature. For example, Einstein said that if we have 2 different theories to explain something when it's moving and when it's sitting still, something's wrong, because there's nothing fundamentally different between moving and being at rest. Whenever you say whether something's moving or not, you're always saying it's moving compared to something else. All motions are relative. There's no such thing as absolute rest. So Einstein said that if you're moving, just because you're moving, that shouldn't change anything about the laws of nature. For example, if you're in a big ship and you're in a cabin and you're doing, you've got some, here's one of the ways that Galileo would put it. He said, if you're in this cabin and you've got some butterflies, a bowl of water with fish in it, you throw things around, you jump around the cabin, whether the ship's docked in port or whether it's moving smoothly on the ocean, nothing's going to be different. If the ship is moving, the butterflies aren't all going to end up at the back wall. They're just going to fly around however they like. If you jump off, the ship won't move from underneath you. You're moving with it. You can't tell whether you're in motion or not by doing any kind of physical experiment. So that was Einstein's first concept. The second is that light moves at the same speed in a vacuum for any observer. Now, light, that's one thing. Speed of light being a constant. Remember, it's the speed of light in a vacuum. It's a constant. Light changes its speed if it's going through something like water. So just imagine out in the vacuum. So what Einstein did is, in putting this together, I'll show one thing that comes out of this, and you might have seen this on Wednesday. Einstein says that the idea of simultaneity. What does it mean for two things to be simultaneous? Anybody have a happen at the same time, right? So to say that two things happen at the same time, we've got to have one idea of measuring time that we could apply to both things. If they happen at the same time and they're right next to each other, it's pretty easy to say whether they happen at the same time or not. You can actually see it. But if something happens in Rome, and you want to know whether it happens at the same time here, you got to have some way of measuring time that you could apply both in Rome and here. You got to have some, you have to have some way of measuring that. A result of Einstein's discovery is that there is no universal time. There isn't a master clock that all clocks can be synchronized to, and any event that takes place anywhere can be given an unequivocal time that it happened. Einstein said that doesn't exist. There is no one time. Here's an example. Here we've got an observer, and he's this ridiculous train's driving by, and he's standing at a spot that happens to be right in the middle of the train as it's passing by. Now, lightning strikes the front and back of the train. It's at the same time, according to him. We'll get there, though. Let's see. The lightning strikes. Here's what happens over time. So, the light hitting the front and the back. The light comes out. As the train moves to the right, the light from where the lightning strikes occurred is moving towards the observer. And so that's what these light bulbs are. It's the light moving towards them faster than the train. At this moment, light from both directions reached him at the same time. He sees, oh, wow, those look like they happened at the same time. Then he traces back in his mind, he sees where they occur, where it appears against the track. Say there's like markings along the track, like mile markers or something. He can say, oh, those are about the same distance from me. Since they're the same distance from me, and I saw the light from them reach me at the same time, they must have occurred at the same time. He could work backwards in his mind and say, oh, this is what happened 4 seconds ago. Lightning struck at the same time. Those two events are simultaneous for him. Let's watch the same scenario. We put the observer on the train. See what happens. And we're going to explain this from our standpoint, not being on the train. Lightning. Using 2 different colors now, you'll see why. Okay. There's the light moving. Since he's on the train, from our point of view, well, he's going to catch up with this light first. He's moving towards it, towards that bright beam of light. So now he saw the light from the front of the train. Lightning has reached him. And now the light from the back of the train reached him. How would he go back and say what initially had happened? How would he explain the lightning that struck? Well, let's take the observations, and now let's just picture him on his train. He would say that he saw light strike the front, and then later he saw light on the caboose. He walks along on the train, while it's moving, he says, well, I'm the same distance from the front and the back. So I know it's not because, I'm the same distance from the front and the back, so light would take the same amount of time to reach me, in the front or the back. Since I saw this one first, it must have happened first. So from his standpoint, light struck the front of the train, and then it struck the back of the train. They weren't simultaneous. Person on the ground would say, oh no, you just think they're not simultaneous. Here's why, it's just because you were moving forward. That's why that happened. But the guy on the train would say, no. Maybe I should have made another animation where the train stays still and the track goes by. The two people would disagree about whether those two things even happened at the same time. So if just by moving, you've eliminated the idea of one time to measure all events in nature. The idea of a single clock, that everything could be said. When did it happen according to this clock? So Einstein said any type, if you had somebody standing watching the train go by versus somebody on the train as it's moving, they would both have a different idea of what a moment in time means. Pretty revolutionary stuff. Now, one of the ways of testing this out, again, so let me go back in terms of what drove him to this. When he was younger, when he was just 16, he thought to himself, what would it be like if I caught up with the ray of light? And then say if a bullet shot out of a gun, like if you catch up to it and you're just watching it, it just, well, maybe it's spinning. You see it spinning. It doesn't look like it just looks like a bullet. He says, well, what would light look like if I caught up with it? Because the understanding of light was that it was a propagation of a wave, of an electrical and a magnetic wave. So he said, if I caught up with that light and I was just watching it, watching the very front of it, it would just look like something that's stationary, but keeps getting more and less electrical and magnetic. There'd be this weird stationary thing of just oscillating electromagnetism. And he says, we've never seen that. It doesn't happen. The idea of trying to catch up with light would result in observing something that we've never observed. And that just goes against the laws of physics. So at 16, he already had a very clear idea of why you couldn't ever move at the speed of light. Put it another way, the way light moves is not like a ball rolling or some of this object moving. It is itself is a principle of nature, like friction or gravity or anything else. Propagation of light is a physical principle. So by putting together the idea that all observers can discover the same laws of nature, and the idea that light always appears to be the same speed for any observer, you have a modification of space and time. One way of testing this is people done experiments where they tried to see whether if you've got water moving, so let's say we've got water moving to the right, and we shine a beam of light through that water in this direction. As the water is moving this way, does the light go faster because it's moving with that water that's moving? The water is going this way, and the light's going this way. Does the light ends up going slower as we watch it from the outside because it has to fight against the motion of the water. That's an experiment that was done in the 1800s. And there's never a very good explanation for why it worked out the way that it did. But Einstein was able to explain it. So I know that a lot of that might be unclear. There's water in the discussion section. So I want to know, I don't know if there it isn't, so you'll get there. We'll find out together. So that's 1905. So after this, he writes his papers, amazing, he's revolutionized space and time. He still can't get a job anywhere but the patent office. He applies to some more, to be a professor at some universities. They say not interested. Sorry. He applies to be a high school teacher. Okay. So then in 1907, he comes up with general relativity, at least as a concept. He thinks to himself, he's sitting in his office and, he sees the building next to him, and he says, if one of the people working on the roof fell off the roof until he hit the ground, they wouldn't experience any gravity. Them and their tools would just sort of be floating together. They would look at their wrench and see it fall to the ground. They're all moving, they're all falling together. So anyway, it took 8 years later before he actually wrote the paper in 1915 where he had a little bit of math tutoring help, and he finally pulled together all the equations and everything for general relativity. In the meantime, now he finally got himself a job at a university. He works in Switzerland, he works in Prague. Eventually, he's lured to Berlin. They say Planck comes out to visit him. As Einstein said it, they looked at him like a prize head. That's how he felt. They wanted to get him. So they said, you come to Berlin, you do a nice job. You're the director of this new institute. You're a professor of physics. They bring him to the Prussian Academy of Sciences. No teaching. Big raise. And Einstein took him up on the offer. So he ended up going to Berlin in 1913. 1915 is the, or in between that, there's World War I, right? 1914. So many of his German colleagues wrote a big article about why it's right. Germany's got the right cause in World War I. Germany's cultured, Germany's standing up for itself. This is just the way things ought to be, which Einstein totally opposes. In 1915, general relativity, he proposes some tests, some ways to figure out if it's true. Where gravity now becomes part of relativity. He figures out why Mercury's orbit moves the way that it does. That's one. In 1919, photographs of stars near a solar eclipse were taken, and see that the stars weren't where they should have been. That was a second major verification of relativity. The New York Times article on that, their front page, it said, "Lights all askew in the heavens. Men of science more or less agog over results of eclipse observations. Stars not where they seemed or were calculated to be, but nobody need worry. A book for 12 wise men. No more could understand it." So, he has a bunch of other things. Wins Nobel Prize. He figures out an idea that ends up becoming lasers. He, just to focus on the conflicts now. Well, one thing is that with Hitler, Einstein starts to identify a little bit more as a Jew. This is not something that was a big deal with him at all earlier in his life, but that sort of raised the issue for him. And it's pretty amazing. When Hitler kicked out all of the Jews from Germany, they lost half their theoretical physicists, over a dozen Nobel Prize winners. In fact, there's no way Hitler could have made the bomb because most of the people who worked on it were people he kicked out of Germany. So, this is a time. So when Einstein came to the U.S., after this, everyone was trying to manage him. The guy who ran the institute in Princeton that he worked at kept trying to prevent Einstein from giving political lectures. Don't make such a big scene out of things. Stop being so Jewish. You just tone it down a little bit. You're just going to make trouble. As long as us Jews don't make any big deal about anything, no one will bother us. Don't draw attention. I said, no, people in Germany did. And I'll give you one example. Fritz Haber. He was a Jew. He converted to Christianity. He had done a tremendous amount of work for Germany. He developed the way we make artificial fertilizer, very important discovery, and he worked a lot on chemical weapons in World War One. Despite having helped the war effort, he still got thrown out with the other Jewish scientists. So Einstein said, "You see how much keeping a low profile helps. This is forget it." So he would do benefit concerts for Jewish refugees. He violently, he protested dramatically the fact that the U.S. would just not let refugees in through quota systems and ridiculous amounts of paperwork required to enter as a refugee. In fact, the guy who ran the Institute of Princeton hid. Roosevelt invited Einstein to the White House, and the guy who ran the Institute at Princeton prevented Einstein from knowing about this. He hid the invitation. Yes. Einstein happened to meet someone at a party who said, "Wow, I can't believe you turned down Franklin Roosevelt's invitation." Einstein said, "What invitation?" "What do you mean?" So, anyway, Einstein went to the White House, they had dinner with the Roosevelts, spent the night, talked about sailing, which Roosevelt and Einstein both liked, and relativity. Okay, last theme, quantum weirdness. So, there is a major difference of viewpoints between Einstein and pretty much everybody else about quantum mechanics, which was that, take Niels Bohr, for example. So Einstein and Bohr had a lot of disputes, friendly disputes. They were good friends. Bohr also got kicked out of Europe. When the Nazis took Denmark, Bohr had to flee to Sweden. And they had helped get the Swedish king to agree to allow more Jewish refugees into Sweden. What it came down to is about an idea of what it means to be real, or what reality means. As one of the weird aspects of quantum mechanics, which if you want to know more, it's just a discussion. It seemed that the act of looking at something seemed to change it. I'll give just one very simple example. Let's say that you've got two boxes here. Well, okay, it looks like one box. One box here. And there's an electron bumbling around in it, bouncing around. At a certain point, you put a wall through it. You take the two boxes to different places. So one goes to Tokyo, one's in Paris. And Niels Bohr, if you asked him, would say that the end of that Google stream. Computer went to sleep. Oh no, it's just a black screen. Okay. They would say, well, the electron is half in this box. And it's half in this box. We don't know where it is. Einstein would say, okay, but what? Let me. So the full ability, the full description of the state of each of these boxes is that they have half an electron. It's yeah, that's the full description. The odds are 1/2 that it's in the box. Einstein says, well, if I open this box, I'm either going to see it or I won't. As soon as I do that, I now know whether it's in this box. If the actual physical state of that box was that it had 50% odds of having an electron, I just instantly changed the state of the box here by looking in this one. Did I really change something thousands of miles away at an instant? Of course, what's simultaneous? But Einstein said he called that spooky action at a distance. It seemed too. Einstein thought something was missing. That quantum mechanics just didn't have it all. This is a sort of simplified example, but this is one of the pedagogies, or one of the demonstrations that Einstein could use. So Einstein said that belief in an external world, independent of the perceiving subject, that's the basis of all natural science. We just don't know it all yet. Einstein said you can't seriously believe that only observable magnitudes go into a physical theory. You can't tell me that there's not, he says, the moon is there even if I don't see it. Right? You can't say that it's only observations, Einstein believed. There's a reality. That was a major debate. That went through to the end of Einstein's life, where, despite basically everybody going in a certain direction, Einstein did. Let me read a few quotes from him about religion, and then hear from you. So, do you believe in God? He was asked. Einstein says, I'm not an atheist. The problem involved is too vast for our limited minds. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows someone must have written those books. The child does not know how. The child does not understand the languages in which they are written. But the child dimly suspects some mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but doesn't know what it is. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of the most intelligent human being toward God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws, but only dimly understand those laws. 3 more quotes. The most beautiful emotion we can experience is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who no longer can wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead, a snuffed out candle. To sense that beyond anything that can be experienced, there is something that our minds cannot grasp, whose beauty and sublimity reaches us only indirectly, this is religiousness. In this sense, and in this sense only, I am a devoutly religious man. 2 more. Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we, with our modest powers, must feel humble. In this way, the pursuit of science leads to a religious feeling of a special sort. What separates me from most so-called atheists is a feeling of utter humility toward the unattainable secrets of the harmony of the cosmos. And this one. The very fact that the totality of our sense experiences is such that, by means of thinking, it can be put in order. This fact is one that leaves us in awe. The eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. The fact that it is comprehensible is a miracle. I have no better expression than religious for this confidence in the rational nature of reality and in its being accessible, to some degree, to human reason. When this feeling is missing, science degenerates into mindless empiricism. So, empiricism. Okay, so sure. I have no better expression than religious for this confidence in the rational nature of reality, and in its being accessible, to some degree, to human reason. When this feeling that nature must be understandable, when this feeling is missing, science degenerates into mindless empiricism. And one more. When I am judging a theory, I ask myself whether, if I were God, I would have arranged the world in such a way. That's what Kepler did. Yeah. Okay. So, yes. Well, in 1900, it was all very quick when Hitler came to power in 33. He wasn't in Germany when Hitler came to power. He was happened to be in the U.S. anyway, which was very good for him. He still went back to Europe as planned. And he was in England and Belgium. Actually, as soon as he landed in Europe, he went to the German embassy and renounced his German citizenship for the second time. Because when he took that post in Berlin, he had to become a German citizen. And so he resigned from the Prussian Academy of Sciences as soon as he got back there. But yeah, it was already in 33 that all the Jews were kicked out of those positions. Max Planck had actually eventually went directly to Hitler to say, you're destroying German science. This is crazy. And Hitler said, well, we're not going to change our policies just because of that. If we have to do without science for a few years, then we'll do without science. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Anything you know about? Yes, ma'am. Oh, Emma.
Yeah. I just actually wanted to know more about Fox idea. You said that his idea of light was more so that it behaved as a particle, and that Einstein asserted that it exists as a particle.
Planck said that the interaction between that light's interaction with matter, that interaction occurred in pieces.
So in its own state.
Yeah, like maybe there's like a certain amount of light, you know, and it's some continuous amount of light. It's not made up of pieces. But that then, it hits something, maybe it reflects off of it or it's absorbed. But if it gets absorbed, it'll only be absorbed in individual pieces in quantum. And the amount of energy in each of those quantum depends on the wavelength of the light. The same thing if a hot body is emitting light, it'll only end up emitting it in pieces. But maybe once the light is made and it's out there, maybe the light will come together and kind of become a squishy mass and not exist as pieces anymore. So the distinction was that Planck said the interaction between light and matter was quantized. Einstein said that light, period, light only exists as quanta, we now call photons. Um, Yeah, well, here's the funny irony. One of the most anti-Semitic, anti-Einstein people had done the experimental work that Einstein drew on to write his paper on photoelectricity. Here's an example of the photoelectric effect. So we'll turn this light on. So you have light shining on a piece of metal, electrons are flying off of it, and overall there's a certain amount of current that gets produced. This would be like an experimental setup. Purple light, how much electricity is it making? I write it down on my chart. Oh, what people found out was that there's a way to measure how strong each individual electron is by, here we go. Not to get too detailed, but so if you put in a battery, so this is negatively charged over here, the electrons won't want to get there anymore. So it's sort of pushing them back, right? They're not going to make it anymore. What Lenard had done, the guy's name was Philip Lenard, he had, found out there's a relationship between, he found out that when you make the light brighter, it doesn't change the energy that each electron has. He thought that if light was just a wave, if you make the wave brighter, it should be able to do more. But not really. More light makes more electrons, but each one isn't any more powerful. The power of each electron that's kicked out depends on the wavelength of the light. So if we made the light, here it's ultraviolet, we couldn't see it anymore. But now it would be powerful enough to actually get the electrons to make it all the way. So yeah, there were so experiments. This is experiments on photoelectricity. Planck was looking at hot things emitting light. Um, Einstein was looking at metal that has light shining on it, shooting out emitting having electricity come out of it. Did that?
It seems like a funny thing, because how do you, like, what type of test would you run, what type of experiment would you run to really draw light from that kind of matter from what Einstein said?
Hmm.
I mean,
That's a good point. Obviously, this involves light interacting with matter.
right, yeah.
Right.
But I thought there was something particular that was like you make a prediction,
He predicted, which was tested, the relationship between wavelength and the voltage it was able to overcome, and that it was a direct relationship. At least that's what I can think of. Okay. Yeah. Yes, right. That's a very good point. That's light interacting just with light. Um, Good point. I mean, obviously, Einstein knew that it was also seemed. I mean, he recognized that light also seemed waverish. That that's one of the other, the big troubles in quantum mechanics. Is when you get down there, is it a particle, is it a wave? It definitely acts like both. Depending on how you look at it, depending on what kind of experiment you do.
So, just wondering about this question of the military.
Mhm.
Sound has boundaries, where the past and light has boundaries between different things. There is this idea that accelerating at a huge rocket in space, you can get going passes away from galaxies and really good for that knowledge. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, you can't. So you can't go past the. You can't ever go faster than light if you're not already faster than light, because so. Um, let's look at adding up velocities of things. Let's say we're in a rocket ship. They wouldn't really need these in space, of course. Okay, so the engine's on. Let's say you get yourself up to you're at half the speed of light. So let's say you've done that. We've got a fusion rocket. We're at half the speed of light. The rocket thinks it's half the speed of light compared to the Earth. We look at it. We say, "Yup, you're half the speed of light. No doubt about it. Half the speed of light." So let's say we've got that. Now let's say the rocket says, "Okay, whatever I did to get up to this speed, to go from zero to my 0 to 1/2 C was, had my engine on for a year. Turn the engine on for another year." And so let's say that when you do that, the rocket, like a bolt falls off of it. So here's a little bolt, falls off. After you leave the engine on for that same amount of time, if here's the Earth. I'll label that Earth. Okay, so we're going at half the speed of half the speed of light. Bolt falls off, turn the engine on again. Say, hey, let's go to the full speed of light. We got to half the speed of light, just do it again. Well, after you do that, the rocket, with respect to the bolt, will be moving at half the speed of light. But because of the way relativity works, it's only going, I'm going to embarrass myself by saying the wrong number, so I won't say it. It ends up only moving like 80% the speed of light. In other words, that as far as the bolt's concerned, the Earth is moving away at half the speed of light. The bolt fell off and the rocket was moving at that speed. As far as the bolt's concerned, a bolt, a nut, let's say a piece fell off, a breadcrumb. The rocket also, it says, hey, that guy's moving forward at half the speed of light. It just works out, and I don't think I can really go through it right now. Sorry. That the rocket compared to the Earth will say it's not a half plus a half equals 1. In relativity, a half plus a half equals, let's say, an 8. Is about right. I mean, 80%. So you can turn the rocket on again. Say another bolt falls off. You turn the engine on again, and you're moving with half the speed of light with respect to that bolt. You're still only going to be moving at 90% of the speed of light compared to the Earth, let's say. So just adding adding relative velocities. I don't add anymore when you're going up at relativistic speeds. Light from the speed of light with respect. Well, I mean, light still looks like it moves at the speed of light for this rocket. If they've got a little thing in here, they've got a light beam and a flashlight, they still say light's, we're not moving at all compared to light. Light still moves at the speed of light compared to us. So that's why you have to compare it to the Earth to say, how would its speed compare to light shooting away from the Earth, from the Earth's point of view? And the Earth would say the rocket's moving at 80% the speed of light. And when we add these, we would get the whole speed of light. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody thinks that light. And, a great experiment was done with that was with binary, with binary stars. So let's say you got two stars going around each other. One of them you can't see. I know that sounds weird. Basically, what happened is you'd see light from a star that would look a little bit red and then a little bit blue, and a little bit red and a little bit blue. They could, because of the Doppler shift, which I didn't mention either. Sorry. When something that's making light is moving towards you, the light looks bluer. When something that's emitting light is moving away from you, it looks redder. So the astronomers had a pretty good idea. There's a star that's moving around, another star that doesn't happen to make light that we're able to see. If the speed of light was relative to the star, the same way, like, if an airplane's flying forward and then it shoots a machine gun and it adds to the speed of the aircraft from the standpoint of the ground, the speeds add together. If that was true, when the star is moving towards the Earth, this light would be moving quicker. Versus when the star is moving away from the Earth, maybe you would end up looking slower. Because if the light's moving with the speed of light with respect to this star, and the star is moving away, from that star's point of view, this light should be moving slower relative to what we'd end up expecting. Now, that means that eventually, the way it would work out is you'd expect to see the star in two places at once. If it's going around enough, there'd be a certain spot where the light from here would catch up with some slower light from here, just right, where you'd end up seeing the star in both spots. So that was a test that they did. So although they had found a number of these stars that were going around something, which they assumed were going around something because they were changing their color, but they still never saw it twice. They would never see the blue and the red shifted light at the same time. It would be one or the other. You'd say, well, the light from our reference frame is always moving the same speed. It doesn't get a speed imparted to it by that star and move at a certain speed of light with respect to that star. Somehow it seems to us it's moving at the speed of light with respect to us. So it seems weird. The light coming out of something that's moving towards you very quickly, the light doesn't go any faster. It still comes towards you at the same speed. Which is odd, because the star still thinks that these are both coming out of it at the same speed. So that's different. This is in mid-1800s, often called the Fizeau experiment. Well, because Fizeau did it. he had water moving in a tube. Tube of water, so it's going this way, it goes back around this way. He'd shoot light through it. Light comes in, it's split into two pieces, goes with the water, hits a couple mirrors, goes with the water again, and then it comes back. Also, got a beam of light coming this way. When it gets split by the initial mirror, it goes this way, goes against the water, hits mirrors, goes against the water, and comes back. He'd compare how long it took to go with the water versus against the water, and measured how much the speed of light changed. He'd turn the water up and down. He'd turn the valve on the water so the water would go faster or slower. And so he worked out, yes, light going through water picks up the speed of the water, but not all of the speed of the water. So people who believed in an ether, didn't mention the ether, totally forgot about it. Okay, we'll come back to ether next. People who believed in the ether said, if light's a wave, what's a wave? Sound's a wave. If you take out air, you can't hear anything. So if light is acting like a wave, like interfering with itself, for example, like waves do, what's waving? What's it moving through? And people say, well, it's moving through the ether. Some stuff that's, even if you suck all the air out of a little bottle, there's still ether there. So people say, well, the water is kind of partially pulling the ether with it. So when the light's going, it goes quicker when it goes with the flow of the water because the water pulled the ether a little bit, and that was how they explained it. With relativity, if you use the relativity formula for adding two speeds together, and you add the speed of light and water, which is 3/4 the normal speed of light, and you add the motion of the water, however fast the water is moving, with the relativity adding of speeds, you get the results of the experiment. So with Einstein's theory, it all worked out fine. No ether being dragged. It just came out very natural. And so you could say that was like a test or a reason of special relativity. Yes, and I think I'm gonna go into the ether. Go ahead.
And that's going to be dialogue and so on, but there's no point in it, I know let's take, for example, the result of the freeway. Usually don't even show me the touch road, the top of the speed, and this is in the other context. Concept of writer needs to become population. First one of the shop that really truly in the same way. That is the idea of avoiding the idea of avoidance on the street of the mainstream course. Anyway, at a certain point, someone says, "Do you have a finite velocity of it?" And one says, "No, retardation." The thought was that Leon uses it, for example, and instead of thinking of light as being propagated at a certain speed, think of it as being retarded at a finite rate, because it leads to a different physical conception. Say finite speed of light as opposed to rate of retardation. Please ignore that.
No, I have no idea what to say about that. I mean, the way, why doesn't light move? There's something about how easy it is for a changing electric field to cause a changing magnetic field. Maybe you could say because that has something to do with why light doesn't move faster. I better not say anything else.
It's clear that light obviously changes in different changes it versus
Couldn't ask him again, I guess.
and
Yeah, because that person asked what I was thinking. Oh, you mean the velocity? Yeah. Let me say, what? Yeah, sure.
Oh, this political theory.
Okay.
Because you said that you're using the experiment of viewing training like the time. They have the same type of outlet of viewing history that he wrote about. This is a kind of method that he used to view the social process of political decisions.
Mm,
Kind of similar.
no, nothing that's like comes to mind.
Like, yes, it's really so while I was right, make the decision that someone can read and kind of like write principle about it, and kind of
well, without the Einstein did have that. He was involved in it with her. And I think the race was Einstein like that.
I mean, I think he had an overall sense of. I mean, it was a very, with the especially the nuclear era. I mean, the nuclear bomb. I mean, it was a pretty terrifying, concept of what the next war could be like. But he was definitely an optimistic person. I mean, he's very, I don't know if this is addressing it or not, but I mean, he's definitely very moral and how people could become better overall and that society could advance. And that, well, tell me if this makes sense. There's one thing I'm thinking about that, which is that although one of the results of relativity is that different people see things in a different way, it's not that it's all relative or something. In other words, Einstein would also, he could tell you, you could figure out exactly how someone else would see it if you knew how they were moving with perspective. It's not just like, well, everyone sees it different. Say, oh, well, if you're moving at, half the speed of light in that direction, then you'd see it this way. I know exactly how you'll see it. It's different than mine. I know exactly how it will be different. So I think what he didn't like the term. He didn't like theory of relativity. He thought that theory of covariance would be better, but that covariant doesn't. It's sort of like a technical math term that doesn't mean anything in general. Yeah, because people said, it was just misinterpreted right from the get-go. It's all relative. There's nothing really because it was an era where that's what the cultural idea was. Music, it's all relative. We used to have these standards in music. That's all out the window, and so people ended up looking at Einstein. People didn't get what he did, and threw him into that same kind of category. Like, oh, we got Stravinsky, and people go to see the Rite of Spring. They think it's terrible and have a riot. But then eventually they get used to that's just the kind of crap you have to hear if you go to the theater now, and they accept it. Um, what Einstein was saying was that what's real isn't space or time. He's saying physical principles they're totally real. Mm-hmm. If you want to look for reality, don't look in these observable things. There's nothing real about when something that occurred is an observation. That's not real. But that's also a very fleeting kind of thing. Like what's definitely true and what's universal is that the principles of nature. They're true, they're real. An understanding of how other people will see something is truly real. So the fact that people see things in a different way it's not. He stressed the universality of relative. I don't know if that comes to mind. I don't know. Yeah. At the premiere, people were just like, "What is this shit?" And people were like screaming and going, there was like a riot, and then so people need to be educated that no, this is you're just stuck in the past, and this is new, wonderful music, and so I guess people learn, and when they performed it again, people were very nice. It's like, I mean, the point isn't to get it's still that kind of crap with that, the cultural offense. It wasn't that people actually had to like any of it. It was just they have to tolerate the idea of saying this is even, music at all. It's some garbage.
Since we're on this topic, what do you think of the concept of using the eye of behavior and talking about relativity? It looks like in Australia, just
wall, it's on the wall, and things like that, you know, you can imagine that it's, something beautiful, and so there's something like that. So maybe it's not just acceptable, you know, it's subjective.
I think as an experience that people have, I mean, you know, first of all, I think some of it is people pretending that they see things that they don't. I know it's not all of it, but that's definitely a part of it. It's like, you know, I mean, take a child, you know, like this, you know, like, oh, it's a urinal sitting on the floor. Like, you know, it's like, did they not finish installing that? Why is this here? You know, I think it's probably a joke on the internet of a comment card at MoMA written by a Museum of Modern Art in New York, written by a child who said, "You call yourself a museum? I didn't see any dinosaurs. All I saw was some trash." But the other aspect of it is if you just don't have a real sense of it to hold on to, then when people use the word beauty, they mean different things. And it's a lot of, you get a lot of work to actually understand the way that something is beautiful. It's not always immediately apparent. You get the first seeing a painting, hearing a piece of music. So if you just don't, if developing the ability to understand it, it's, yeah. So people might think that, you know, this or that is beautiful, and they're using a word that doesn't have the same meaning. It's actually not having that concept, or I'm rejecting it. I mean, it's so ugly. There's so much ugly crap everywhere. And it's deliberate ugliness. Yeah, that's like very, I'm not one of those people who believe in ideals and, you know, all meaningless, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the ideas Einstein was giving you that you yourself said what could be the future of the world? An example, I have a visual when you were looking at hotel construction and that was Alameda. Was that he noticed Einstein had pictures coming up in this
Yeah.
right. And I found a letter of that Einstein was looking into the relationship between the sun, starlight, but the sun actually had some effect on how stars shone on the earth. And he very clear because they obviously was what happened to me in years. So that's just one example. I never really followed up more, so maybe that's one.
Well, so Einstein died at 55, so we've had, you know, 60 years now of part of it is some of the things that he said would eventually be found and he expected to see. One was the idea that light would change its color by gravity, which was tested in, I think, in 1960 uh, in a tower at Harvard. It's an experiment. They have some sort of radioactive isotope that would emit light in a very particular gamma particles in a very particular way, with very particular energy. And the light at the top of the tower, by the time it comes down to the bottom, should look a little bit more blue. And light from the bottom of the tower, when it goes up, it should look a little bit more red when it reaches the top. So the way they did this is they put the radioactive source at the top, so that when it came to the bottom, it was a little bit blue. They saw at what rate they would have to raise the emitter at the top so that it looked like the normal color. And they got that when they raised it at a rate of 2 millimeters per hour, it looked like the normal rate. So that was gravitational redshift. That was one of the three predictions in Einstein's general theory that he had made specific. That was 1960. In 71, they did the experiment of flying planes around the Earth in two different directions and got the different amount of time that the atomic clocks on the planes took. That was 71. 76, they sent an atomic clock up in a rocket and saw that the time changed by gravitational shift in time. There was that 1919 experiment led by Eddington when the stars around the eclipse of the sun moved. Nowadays, they use radio. They would use radio astronomy, which is way more. In 1991, they could even detect the bending of light around Jupiter using not an optical light, but radio light. Um, let's see here. Yeah, that's not exciting. There is in 1979 was the first claim of experimental evidence for gravitational waves. Back in 79, it was more indirect. And then in 2015, we had the LIGO with the gravitational waves. In 1966, they had muons. I'm not quite sure what those are, but they don't live that long. But at CERN, they accelerated them to very close to the speed of light, and they lived 12 times as long. The GPS satellites would get off if we didn't make corrections for relativity. The correction is actually huge. Um, You'd be off by a kilometer in a day. That's how far off the GPS clocks get without taking into account relativity. So it's not minor. They'd be useless as soon as they'd be useless in no time if it wasn't taking. Yeah. So those are all. Now some of the other things. Here's one thing that Einstein really sort of troubled him was um, well, the thing that he was really working on for the last part of his life was trying to unify gravity and electromagnetism. So there's still more, unfortunately, far from having less types of forces, now there's more. Now there's a strong force and a weak force too. Um, I mean, I think one thing that he would have been really excited about is if he knew more about, let's say, what Bernanke was doing. Because Einstein, he was really looking at a lot of biology, for example. And I'll tell you the honest truth, and I feel bad about this, but he had a very odd view of free will, where he actually thought that determinism applied to us. Like what we would end up doing was really determined and we didn't have free will. But that we should act like we have free will because then we'll all be more moral. And it's like that's so stupid that I don't know if he's misquoted or if he actually thought that.
I was going to say, and God, usually the founding document of the Temple which was the full Berkeley Russell and Euclid, is the Einstein-Russell document. Einstein served against Euclid records with Berkeley Russell, attributed to the guidelines and filed. That's Berkeley Russell. So, of course, like the Berkeley Russell channel community that the theory is real. So I'm just not sure, politically, if this is logically because you're able to understand all the, like we're very fortunate here in the ability, because of women, to epistemologically understand some people who say good things, like that Einstein says it's for FDR, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That we have a much greater ability, I believe, than someone like
Oh, yeah.
to understand energy operations against.
I mean, Einstein wasn't right about everything. I mean, he didn't really get economics that well. He thought, technology was just, steal jobs. Maybe it wasn't such a good thing to have too much of it. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't right about everything. Sure. Yeah.
There's also
And I think that where Bernanke went with the different phase spaces in biology and cognition and economics implicitly, I think that's a whole tremendous place to go. That Einstein just never really got into that kind of stuff. I mean, I personally think that the idea of trying to say we're done with quantum mechanics before we've moved into some weird things about biology, quantum stuff, I think it's stupid. I mean, there has to be something in the abiotic that's not determined. It might seem random, simply because what totally governs it isn't abiotic. I mean, there's got to be some way our minds affect our brains. We have free will. We have to decide what our thoughts are. Somehow that has to make our brains do something different. And we don't know how that works. Anyway. And there's like a group at Princeton actually that was doing some kind of studies of this, like quantum stuff. Like it's got a little bit weird. It's like people like trying to make something happen. Like, they, no, it was anyway. I mean, it seemed like something in the right direction. That's sort of my shtick. But I think if there's something to figure out about that.
Einstein did have another statement about causality. It was when drawing into the Fox theory. I'm sure it's familiar with it. Makes it clear that it makes a very clear distinction between the simple mechanical determinism and that complex idea of causality. So it's not just a simple determinism.
That's the trouble with I mean, it's always in what context do you say something, and people think different things. It's not like you're really sure about everything you think. Because yes, good point. He wasn't so. That's an example of him not being so adamant about direct determinism. I think the way he expressed his problem with the quantum mechanics people wasn't about determinism. To him, it was really more about reality. That they said that fundamentally, their observations are the only thing that's real, and to try to ascribe a reality underneath it that is not purely made up of observables. That's where the fight was. This thing when Einstein said to Heisenberg, he said, but surely you don't believe that. Uh, there we go. But you can't seriously believe that nothing but observable magnitudes must go into a physical theory. Now you might say, well, observable magnitudes, yeah, you should only use things that it meant something very specific for them. Like actually, Einstein said, you don't seriously believe that only observable magnitudes must go into a physical theory. Heisenberg said, isn't that what you did with relativity? It's not true. Right? Sometimes people try to make that parallel. They say, well, Einstein said that there's no real time something happened. It's all based on who's observing it. So isn't that like the quantum stuff? So only his observations and there's no reality behind them. But it's not the same thing. In relativity, you can say how someone else would have seen it. You can convert.
I'm still interested in this idea of free will from the standpoint of predictability. And it seems like the difference between an intelligent being and any other universe is that you can't predict what they're going to do in the same sense, because if that person hears the prediction, they'll say he can do something else. And so it's like there is some kind of free will. It's based on this, based on cognitive abilities. Does this make us completely a separate, different from the whole rest of the universe in some sense? In other words, let's say our creative abilities to do something different that's never been done before, is that a sign of that there's something unique about human beings in the universe, that they're not just material objects, caused to do things?
I think that sort of magic that we're able to expand the scope of those possible things that we might do. Like, I bet you there's a baboon next year who's going to do something no baboon has ever done. Right, like the exact order of eating a termite and then scratching its butt and then eating its hand or whatever. It's like no baboon has ever done exactly that before. But if you look at like the scope of all things in baboondom, I think that's just a good way to like really see the kind of difference. It's where you say, well, okay, human beings have electricity and steam engines and motors, and it's like, okay, that's changing the scope of. That's a good way to look at it. Predictability. What a rock's going to do is pretty predictable compared to a person, right? Or the way they'll respond to things, you kick a rock, it's going to go fly at a certain speed. You kick a person, how will they respond? Maybe you'll have a conversation about it, maybe they'll kick you back. That's right.
It's the old thing about, is God omniscient, or how can God be omniscient and omnipotent? He knows what's going to happen. That means he's limited to change it because
obviously, you're asking the wrong question, you're proceeding from, level thinking. And look at it that way. It's like also the whole thing about free will. It doesn't mean we can do whatever we want. It's not free will. Well, because in fact, most people that think they're doing whatever they want are actually slaves because they're just enslaved to the sense.
Did you decide to want to do that?
Well, I'm free to go out and, run around naked. Is that freedom or is that, or what? But in reality, as has been developed over the centuries by Augustine and various people, free will is really the freedom to be in agreement with God, freedom to do what God wants to do is free. So, if Einstein says we don't have free will, I don't think he means it in a way that
Like the idea of being free from arbitrariness and free from
being free from being controlled by the passions and things like that. That's freedom. Being more and more in agreement with God is the way to get freedom. And that's freedom. We're free to go.
Question of Einstein and free will. I was wondering about the question of Leibniz and Einstein. Because, on the one hand, you have, in Leibniz, you have a discussion of mass and energy. You have discussion of, relativity. I mean, a discussion of the relations of so forth. You also have, Einstein's, ideas of God, and a lot of, ideas of Leibniz. And I don't remember who wrote it. I pulled an article off the internet, Einstein as Leibniz, and some professor somewhere in the country wrote this some time ago. And, I mean, Leibniz's ideas of free will are not what most people would ever in a gazillion years think is free will, because it's an organ, that has enormous freedom. And anyway, I don't, I read the intellectual biography of Leibniz, which is really an amazing book. I mean, you can't take it away from this woman, that this is a great, important, work on Leibniz. I mean, on Leibniz. No, I'm getting this confused. But anyway, but it seems in reading that, what was Leibniz's, Einstein's relationship? I think we even get the next step in my mind. Einstein's relationship with Leibniz.
Right, because there's its own more research. He definitely, you knew him, you looked at him. I mean, their ideas of relativity are very similar. I mean, Einstein had this, the light being the same for every observer, which led to all of those, conclusions. But the basis of it, that the only true law, the only true statements about how nature operates should depend on motion. Leibniz says that he's completely explicit about that. When he's saying, look, I'll tell you why Descartes' rules of motion are stupid. They differentiate between rest and motion. And we watch some balls bouncing into each other, and we're moving with one ball, or we're moving with the other, or they're both moving with respect to us, and we change how they're moving with respect to us. It should all come out to be exactly the same. That's a condition on any possible law, is it has to respect any potential principle has to respect relativity. That's how Einstein looks at it. He says, with relativity, we've also come up with it circumscribes all potential possible principles we're ever going to discover. Any concept that wouldn't be invariant under different reference frames couldn't be a real principle. So in that case, I mean, that's like almost a total parallel between them. You know, Leibniz didn't say light moves the same speed for everybody. You couldn't know that. Einstein's thoughts on God reminded me so much of Leibniz's. So much. Because Leibniz had that total conviction that God designed the universe in the best possible way, that God's power, yes, is very powerful, but don't neglect to look at his wisdom. You know, big fight they had with Newton.
Yeah.
You know, Newton had the, it's good to be the king sort of view of God. Or even says, what's the point of being God if you don't get to order people around? I mean, you were a king, when you figured out everything so well in your state, you didn't have to do anything. Or, you know, what would be the point? Why bother being a king if you can't, you got nothing to do? I would say, well, you're actually a very good ruler. You don't have to intervene day to day, except to, do something seemingly miraculous. And Einstein had that conviction that he had that not only should the universe be understandable and knowable, but that it also should be good, or that it should be very close to Planck actually on that. After they had a big to do in London in 1919 when they revealed the results of the expedition to look at the eclipse. Einstein wasn't there. He bought a violin to celebrate. Planck said after the eclipse and the light bent around the sun, the amount that Einstein had predicted, Planck said the intimate union between the beautiful, the true, and the real has again been proved. Or think of some of those quips that Einstein makes. So what if we hadn't seen the light bend around the sun the way that he would say? He said, well, I'd be very sorry to hear that God made a mistake then. But that it should make sense and it should be good. There's, it's not just laws for the annual thing. It should actually be, I didn't include it in this, but another one of the things that he said was a theory is better or more beautiful if a simple, or to the extent that a simple idea encompasses a great variety of results. It's direct Leibniz quote. It's direct Leibniz quote. Very, very simple.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, maybe there's Einstein doesn't have that much, not that much written about what his ideas really were for the world or whatever. But that this the Leibnizian idea of free will might have been the way he thought about it. That it's not, you can't, you just really can't do anything.
Well, he sure lived a life of, when something's wrong, he's going to say something about it,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also to be able to, just use your imagination without seeing something or making a calculation or doing anything, and make a discovery. I mean, that's the greatest of all free will imaginable. That really few people must get to.
Go ahead.
I used to study Spinoza a bit, and I like some of the ideas that he presented. Like, for example, he would say he has, utilities, these fake things for that. And what he said was that people think they have free will because they are aware of what they do and what they want and so on. But they are not aware of the causes, of the reasons why they want things. They do things. So I think they need out of free will. But it says if you understand how the human mind works, then I think it's like you rise to a higher level where if you understand how your own mind works and the way that emotions work, and if you rise above those, you can rise above them and discover. And he does talk about the same kind of freedom that Leibniz does, and in a higher sense, not in the sense of I can do whatever I want, because I can do whatever I want, it's just a cause, whatever I want, it's just a cause and effect, trace it back into the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets to a question of morality too. I mean, yeah, Einstein was definitely influenced by Spinoza, like before. Or there's another thing that Einstein had written down. I quote from I think it was Schopenhauer. I don't know, but that man can do as he wills, but cannot will what he wills. Which it's not fully true because if you do it by analyzing who you already, I think it's when you make decisions to be somebody you haven't been before. I find it very hard to feel that when you choose to adopt, and take the political case. If you choose to adopt responsibility for where the world is going, and it's very much unlike what you've done before, and it's a shift for you as a personality. It's not coming from the culture around me. That you really can. Then you can say why, where it comes from. You could say, hey, I've got a commitment to this, connected to desire for the future, and it didn't just like come from like somewhere in your belly button or something like that. I just don't know what people think about that. There's some people definitely choose what they're gonna do with themselves. Right? Some people might say, well, some people are just like political, and I'm not, like, well, Martin Luther King he wasn't a mutant. I mean, he was a human being who made a decision that anybody can make. Joan of Arc made a decision that anybody can make. This isn't, yeah. How much did the researchers have to pay them? Two ways to address it. Start by distinguishing, I think, between will and desire. Some of this, I think it is a little bit different. I think we have desires that come from, there's obviously some just very basic, sort of physical. Yeah, we're creatures of mind. Human beings have minds. We also clearly have bodies, and we've got, a great deal of sort of a background of just like, actually human. We've got physical bodies, so we've got desires for there's physical desires, I'm sure we're all quite aware of. Things like that you don't, they're just sort of there. You get a culture that you grow up in, and then gives people an idea of some things that they would want, that maybe they think are unique to them, or universal to all people, that are really very culturally specific. I'm going for this, I think this is a good thing, so I'm like, I know. But I think that the other aspect of it is that those, the freedom that you get in having decided what you plan to do. Um, you might say, I've got some desires, I just sort of accept that I have them and I'm going to try and achieve them. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be, free to pursue those desires or those goals that I've got. I think it's a different thing for a person who says, I'm going to decide what I plan to will. I've got a life, it's not that long. What am I going to do with it? What is it going to remain after I'm dead? Spend a long time being dead. What will that affect it? What will be the immortal contribution of your life? And you decide what you. It's just a very different basis for having an idea of what you want to do with your life. Like did some people might say, well, everything comes from your desires, from your five senses and all that. Well, I don't know. Is the desire to know the truth come from your five senses? Is a desire to help other people who will never meet and they're not born yet? Come from your pleasing your five senses? No, it doesn't. So I just think it's a very special thing that we're able to, adopt an identity that is just not connected to those sorts of things that we do have in common with animals and very capable of wanting things and aren't about money and prostitutes and giving each other up and wanting to discover how does the world work or say I want to make sure that these discoveries we got get implemented. We know how to grow food. We've never seen any hunger on this planet. We can cure this. That's you know,
you're actually capture a quality of making the whole process one question. It doesn't really probably why Einstein had the same thing. There's a hypothesis underlying it, which you're activating.
I think, especially something about evolution and his idea of economics. I mean, I think one of the most powerful things about it is that it pulls everything together. I mean, a lot of people maybe study economics think it's about money or stuff or something like that. For LaRouche, it's the science of increasing human creativity. How do we discover things, implement them to improve our lives and our ability then for more people to be able to participate in that process? We think about the agony or the horror of just people in general who don't have anything to do with themselves. Like, what are you supposed to do all day? Work, because you're just supposed to make money, because if you don't, you're going to get evicted, so because you got to go to work, and maybe you want to take care of kids, and it's kind of natural and a good thing. You see, well, where's the, what is the point? It's people who look for meaning in their lives in a society that's not connected to them. It's not arbitrary. Like, there actually is something, there's a science to meaning to human life. Not that it's totally figured out or it's 100% clear or known or anything fully, but, that a commitment to development and discovery and that kind of human identity also frees you from wondering, what the hell am I doing with my life? What's the point of it? What's the point? I just, pay bills and I die and that's it, or, I enjoy myself for I get a better job so I can spend more time on the PlayStation. I don't know, like what's the point? So, being able to have a point is a wonderful, it's a wonderful gift that we've got. I mean, the opportunity that we have right now to, during Michael was speaking about, get jazzed to totally change U.S. policy, get involved in join the new paradigm of a space program again, do all of this. Like, that is that's freedom. Being able to say, yeah, I got a reason to be alive. I got something to do.
I had a neighbor who lived across the street, and she was in insurance, and they were selling insurance. And somehow, when finally they got ongoing, it come to the point where, you gotta die. I don't know how much insurance you got. She never had thought about So, she was very, it's like her death was totally tragic because, everything around her, the whole world was going to go away and no longer insurance and preventing. There was nothing she could, she had nothing behind for one life.
And you don't want to say, what was that all about? Okay. Music time?
Yeah.